Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets, joined once again by Lion Zagami. So it's got the lion, the lion of God. So you're definitely the lion of God. So bringing out the truth with the the amazing series, Confessions of Illuminati, 12-book series, and now we've ventured into new territory. So the new territory, number one bestseller again, The Rise and Fall of a Frankish Monster, exposing Jeffrey Epstein and the most powerful Jewish sect in the world. So you did an article, very interesting article, on the Sabbatean Frankish SOROS gave millions to support Mamdani, and now they will ruin New York City. So thanks for coming on again, Leo.
Thank you for having me on, and I must thank also all the people who are appreciating this book and making it number one in several sections on Amazon. I also had a couple of positive reactions from the Jewish community, even from the Orthodox Jewish community.
Very good.
People who are self-critical, who admit the problem. You see, then there is people instead, which I can't really discuss the whole thing because they are like, either demanding more evidence or saying that basically it's not only the Sabbatean Frankists who are the cause of all ills in Israel or in the Jewish community. But for the people who are more evolved, and like I said, even people within the Orthodox community, which, as we know, has showed with the support they gave at the last minute to Mamdani, especially the anti-Zionist ones, but also part of the reconstructionists. We have seen basically the Jewish community, which should have feared the anti-Semitism of Zoran Mamdani, suddenly capitulating to it. And then we have the Sabbatean Frankists per excellence. I'm talking about Alex Soros and his father George Soros, still in the game from behind the scenes, who have they have given millions, like you said. And I published an article you can find on leozagami.com where I described where all this money went in the last 9 years to eventually materialize a candidate like Zoran Mamdani, who is, of course, promoting what we can describe as Islamo-socialism. And Islamo-socialism has a very long story. And as you know, you said yourself, I have just completed a series of books, Illuminati Confessions, which have been published in the English language since for 10 years now. And number 10 of these confessions is dedicated to Islamic Freemasonry and the secret societies behind the eternal conflict in the Middle East. And also the links with the Sabbatean Frankist reality, with other Jewish realities, but also with the secret societies which are behind everything that we see on a daily basis happening in the Middle East. And so, and also in North Africa, in all the Muslim world, which is, as you know, very divided. Zoran Mamdani comes from the 12er Shia, which I've talked about in volume 10, and I've talked also about the connection that Iranian Shia have with socialism, with communism, because it was there that eventually they manifested the republic in the name of a revolution, which mixed those leftist tendencies that we saw in the universities, even in Europe or in America in the 1960s, those leftist tendencies that took over the whole academical community since then, whose ultimate product is Zoran Mamdani. The father of Zoran Mamdani is a professor at Columbia University who has that kind of tendency. But it's also quite incredible to see, I mean, Alex Soros, who is now the new face of the Open Society Foundations, coming out in the open after the election of Mamdani, saying that I'm so proud to be a New Yorker, the American dream continues. The American dream. The American. This is uncharted territory here, because, as you know, I'm of course born in Italy. I have a lot of relatives who came to America, especially New York, 100 years ago, to because of the poverty that there was in Italy, especially in the early 1920s, or just after the First World War. And then they manifested, of course, the American dream. I don't know if this whole thing with Mamdani, it can be called the American dream. It can be called the American nightmare. The New York was built by Irish people, Italians, and Jews, of course. But this is the first time we see advancing what I have discussed also in volume 10, those 6 million, almost 6 million Jews that are now populating the United States of America. Now, they need to be integrated, but we know that there is already signs that are not very good, especially with Dearborn, Michigan, what happened before Halloween, when they were about to prepare a terrorist attack. Fortunately, they were stopped. But at the same time, we have, like we stated, Alex Soros, who is himself a Sabbatean Frankist, because Alex Soros survived during the Second World War, pretending to be a Christian with fake Christian papers in a typical Sabbatean Frankist modality. Let's not forget that in my new book, it's a unique book because I offer an insight into the milieu surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, and in this milieu we have all sorts of people. Today the economy of our country is in the hands of Scott Bessent, who worked for George Soros, who served as the managing partners of Soros Fund Management in London from 1991 to 2000, and later returned to the company as its chief investment officer from 2011 to 2015. And during his time there, he was involved in key investment decisions, and he was called and considered always a protege of George Soros. So this has to be very clear. We can't be duped into believing that anything proposed by the Trump administration is inherently good. We need to watch everything with a critical perspective, especially after what has happened in the last few months with the Epstein case and the massive cover-up, which is not specifically because Trump has done something wrong himself, like I explain also in this book. It has nothing to do with Trump, because Trump, in the sense of his criminal actions, they never have been demonstrated or even questioned by Virginia Giuffre, for example, and other witness. Otherwise, probably the Democrats will have used that a long time ago. However, the background, the milieu behind Jeffrey Epstein, that is a more serious thing, because that involves, as we said before, the B'nai Brit elite, the mega group, people at a very high level of our society. And now we have created basically a problem here in the last few months, because we haven't given really what Americans wanted. Americans are very practical people. The American dream is made also of being able to afford the turkey for Thanksgiving. It's also about spending a decent amount, but not spending some crazy amounts of money when you go to the supermarkets and feeling like you're getting ripped off every time you go at the cashier. Because this is what's happening here. There has been a problem in the way. It's very slow, the process that Trump is working out with Scott Bessent in regards to the tariffs and everything else. And this leads the majority of people to question then the results, even if maybe we could have a positive result in the next year or 2 years. But people want at times the immediate result, especially when, like we discussed in private before we went on the air, we had the pandemic that created and generated so many problems for the economy. Yeah. And soon after the pandemic, you need to really put the Americans first. The great work that Trump has done with Tom Homan in regards to immigration is to be lauded, and is totally something that we should support. But the problem is you can't also, like we said in the other show, you can't really put into discussion the so-called Obama subsidiaries or any support to the system that is giving millions of Americans the possibility of sustaining a decent medical assurance.
Yeah.
So,
well, another thing like we talked about was in Seattle, there's a mayor's race that's up in the air. So Katie Wilson, who is an avowed communist, is looking like she's going to get it because they're doing the mail-in ballots. The Democrats love the mail-in ballots because they cheat on them. And so she's gaining day by day. She's gaining on Bruce Harrell, who's the incumbent, and won initially, but the mail-in ballots are coming in now. So we may have communists on both coasts here pretty soon. And
but it is, you see, it is really sad to see that this might trigger a reaction in every big city, because we already have this trend for many decades that the main cities in the United States are in the hands of the Democratic Party. Now that the Democratic Party is shifting to the left, that even Nancy Pelosi is leaving because she's scared for her own. She has done so many deals that made her rich during her career. She entered politics with 150,000. She exit with over 200 and whatever million, almost 300. And that is incredible and demonstrates how corrupt are these people, insider trading, of course, accepting money from the various lobbies and all kinds of things that in the end compromise anybody who goes to Washington. So I always had the great belief that bringing a billionaire in the White House would be a good thing because it's more difficult to corrupt. But the problem is that the system, like we discussed earlier, is corrupt to the core. So politics in itself doesn't seem to have the solutions anymore. And this is really where the communists creep in, and now they have the Islamo socialism, because it's not only communism here that is creeping in. It's something that needs to be a little bit explained, let's say, because otherwise we might have some misunderstanding. I mean, Zoran Mandani is the product of a long tradition. Here we are talking, first of all, of a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, which are themselves already at the extreme, okay? Bernie Sanders, for example, who is a typical secularized Jew, Sabbatean, Frankist kind of guy, is not even officially a member, but he is inspirational for them, and in fact, he seems to be very much inclined to support that direction, and he's been for years. But why is this direction working out for them, and why they might win the midterm elections? Simply because they are saying, how much money do you have in your pocket? How much are you paying for your rent? Are you able to afford a new car? No. So that's it. You need to put us back in power. And that is the problem here. You understand, Michael? It's like, so Zoran Mandani, a guy who we will never have imagined having even a remote possibility a year ago, when in the polls he was 1%. I mean, it was ridiculous. Or a few decades ago, after 9/11, imagine if somebody said, I will make you mayor, that you are Zoran Mandani, directly from...
Yeah, we'll have a Muslim as mayor, yeah.
Yeah,
no.
and you are from Uganda, and we bring you here, and people
stone him
like,
to death, yeah. But you had George Soros funding him. Now, George Soros, or not George Soros, but Alex Soros.
Both.
Who was born, well, both of them, yeah. But Alex born in New York and has a home in New York, who married Huma Abedin, who has connections with the Muslim Brotherhood. So, I mean, it's all starting to tie together.
She has connections even with the Saudi Arabia elite and much more. I mean, it's like there is an alliance here between... That's why I wanted to discuss and explain to you today also the importance of understanding Islamic socialism. Because you see, in a traditional view of Islam, socialism or Marxism is haram, is prohibited. but because
forbidden. That's
forbidden,
right.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's forbidden.
Communism forbidden.
Yes, so that is forbidden. But
But that's total BS. I've been in the Middle East. It's
no.
total communism. So,
No, but in fact, I wanted to go and explain how this Islamic reformist eventually managed to manifest Islamic socialism or even Islamic communism. What happened is that they base their own claims from a guy who was maybe the fourth or fifth guy who embraced Islam. So a very close companion to Prophet Muhammad, the guy called Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari claimed that at the time became the principal antecedent of Islamic socialism, because he is regarded by the Muslims as the first Islamic socialist, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. And why is he called the first socialist of Islam? Because he protested against the accumulation of wealth by the ruling class. And you have during the Uthman Caliphate. So he urged a more equitable redistribution of wealth. For that reason, he's seen as an inspiration. However, he's not even the first to embrace that kind of idea, because we could go even back before Islam even started, at the time of the Zoroastrians.
right, very good. Yeah.
For example, in 524, there was a guy called who was born Mazdak. Mazdak was an Iranian, let's say, cleric, priest of the Zoroastrians, known as the Momad. That's how the priests of the Zoroastrians are known. And he was claiming that the prophet Ahura Mazda and inspired them to institute social welfare programs. I mean, this is at the time in which Muhammad wasn't even around yet. However, in Islam, we have, of course, traditional clerics, imams, sheikhs, who say the system is perfect. We don't need fascism, we don't need Nazis, we definitely don't need communism, because everything is in the Sharia. But this is not what the new Muslims want. The new Muslims often embraced socialism and communism also as part of their anti-colonial mindset. And also another thing, in Volume 10 of my Confessions, if you remember, I presented a guy called Jamaluddin al-Afghani, a guy with a turban who claimed to be Afghani, but in reality was Iranian. He claimed to be a Sunni, but in reality was Shia. This guy is very important in our story. Why? Because Jamaluddin al-Afghani, who was a Freemason for the Italians and for the English, then created his own Masonic Grand Lodge in Egypt before being kicked out, and also was behind the murder of one of the rulers of Persia, this guy here. This guy here is very important because he is regarded as the father of modernism in Islam, but is also the inspiration for the Salafist, which is basically the fundamentalist, as you know. And at the same time, he's the guy who has inspired the Muslim Brotherhood. He's the actual guy who inspired the beginning of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt becomes then entrenched of these ideas, leftist ideas, Marxist ideas mixed with Islam. And that is, of course, in the Sunni world. In the Shia world, things are even more extreme and even more quick in manifesting. Let's say that between the 1920s and the 1930s, in Iran, we start having the first groups that, we had basically a movement known as the movement of God-worshipping socialists. God-worshipping socialists. Only in Iran they could come up with such bullshit. But in any case, What happened is that at the Tehran University, especially the Faculty of Engineering, has always been the place where they started to oppose the Shah. You know that at one point the CIA and the English intelligence participated and supported the Shah, the Pahlavi dynasty with the coup d'etat in the early 50s. That I also discuss in volume 10, because that coup d'etat was also involving the support of this mysterious Cairo Lodge. In any case, at that point, instead of getting rid of the problem became even more, let's say that in the 1950s, they started to really embrace, apart from the fact that they, of course, were inspired by people, even in the Sunni world, like Jamaluddin al-Afghani, because in the end, Jamaluddin al-Afghani was a Muslim Illuminati and he was actually a Shia. But they started to embrace a guy called Ali Sharati. Ali Sharati is a very important guy. I want to show you the image of this guy, because this guy will become, he dies actually in 1977, so not yet when the revolution starts, but without him, we would not have had a revolution in Iran. This is his image, Ali Sharati. And Ali Sharati has an incredible story, because when he was actually starting to foment the students and stuff, the Iranian secret police, of course, made him a visit, and he was kicked ass. But then what he did, he went to Paris, just like Khomeini. And in Paris, he actually achieved something important, because he was obtaining I think a PhD there. I mean, he was he took a degree from one of the most prestigious universities in Paris. He was a man, definitely a man of culture. But what happens is that he was the guy who then will inspire, he's called the most influential Iranian intellectual of the 20th century, or at least one of the most influential. I'm talking about him, Michael, because you have to understand the socio-cultural, religious background of Zoran Mandani. And the father of Zoran Mandani was very much inspired by Ali Shariati. And so these figures need to be understood in order to understand what is coming to America. Because you see, when the leftists supported what eventually manifested with the Shia clerics and Khomeini, I don't think they had an idea of what they were about to unleash. Because once the revolution in Iran exploded, the Shah had to leave the country and everything else. I talk very much in detail about it, as you know, in volume 10. Mm-hmm. At that point, these fundamentalists, who I don't think really appreciated the whole Karl Marx leftist ideology more than the Sharia, they actually started institute, then the Pasdaran, the whole show became very much fundamentalist. So yes, they took elements of that leftist ideology of Ali Shariati, but then after is a little bit like, I present myself as a socialist like Mandani, but then after I bring you the jihad, I bring you the rule of the Sharia, I bring you everything. So it's the two faces here. And Mandani comes from the Shia world, so it's very important for us to understand. Ali Sharati was inspired, like we said, from Jamaluddin al-Afghani, from Sir Allama Muhammad, but also by Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud wasn't a Muslim. He was actually a secular, a Jew, Sabbatian Frankist in a way, no? So, and of course, we have a guy like Sigmund Freud who becomes influential through this guy. He becomes influential in the actual world of the Shia Muslims. But it's not the first time. If you read volume 10, I explained that Shia Muslims were born out of a guy called Saba, who was an Erev Rab, who was a Jewish person. So even before the Sabbatean Frankists, we have the Erev Rab, which we have discussed other times, the ones who followed Moses into the desert and into the promised land. So, and they were not necessarily Jews, they were magicians, occultists at the court of the Pharaoh. So here we have Zoran Mandani, who is bringing you through the support also of the Schwarz, because Soros is known as Soros, but his surname is Schwarz, and Schatz actually, Schwarz, sorry. And this surname that he doesn't use anymore is the clue to understand his background. And the way that we understand his background is to go back to through the family ancestry, and it's what I've done in my new book, as you know. It's going, instead of simply doing like most journalists or authors are doing in regards to Epstein and following the contemporaneity of the case, let's go back in times, see who these people are, what they have created, and of course the progressive policies that are merging the opposites here. Because we always said that if I bring you these woke policies in Gaza or in the Middle East, in any country, they will reject them. They will tell you, you are crazy, this is haram, this is like sinful, this is not something we can follow. And so only in the West we find this really unholy alliance, I will claim, I would say today, it's an unholy alliance if you think about it. Because Zoran Mandani claims to be a practicing Shia Muslim. At the same time, he is also socialist. And like I said, these two things not always go together. Now,
yeah, there's a Communist Control Act of 1954. And in this, the Communist Control Act of 1954, I'll show the screen.
No. But then after, what happened was we had the Ba'ath Party in Iraq, in Syria. The Ba'ath Party, we have the Palestinian Front for Liberation. Of course, this is the moment in which in Iran they were attempting a coup d'etat against the Shah that was stopped already. You see, the coup d'etat that was stopped in Iran in the 1950s is very important for us today, because what happened in Iran in 1953 was simply stopping something. There was, of course, also all these anti-colonialist groups that mixed elements of Islam and communism. They also had a direct connection, not only, but also with the Soviet Union. The Communist Party of the United States is a reality. And of course, it was subject to an internal security act. We had McCarthyism at the time. We had the threat of communism that was stopped by the FBI. And people still to this day, all these leftists, Jimmy Kimmel style, they think that there was an exaggeration, to do things like going and arresting or interrogating film directors or actors because they were too communist. But the reality is that at the time, cinema was much more than what it is now. Cinema was a major element of propaganda. There has always been an office of the Ministry of the Pentagon in Hollywood, as you know. And every single film that passes through Hollywood, if it was a film that touched on war themes, had to be sanctioned by this office. That will also provide tanks or other things if you needed them when you are filming, just like, I don't know, Tom Cruise, Top Gun, if you need, a bunch of jets or whatever. Think about it. The last Top Gun of Tom Cruise was simply predictive programming about the attack on Iran.
Yep. So there's a big push right now to deport Mamdani. Because they're saying that he...
Forget about the impossible. Let's think about the possible. let's think about how socialism has not worked in Islam, because it's not the first. I mean, I understand what you mean. It's very important that we address the fact that there will be a bunch of Republicans saying, okay, we want to send Mandani back to his own country. It's never going to happen. Forget about it. It's just the same old distraction. We need to focus.
I know. It's like these guys talk, but they never do any action. It's like,
me and you tend to focus more on the real issues. Now, you have been a man of action also with your missions abroad. You know very well that another socialist Muslim was Muhammad Gaddafi, who wrote the Green Book. The Green Book was inspired by the Red Book of Mao Zedong. It wasn't as well written because he was a little bit more, let's say, of a Bedouin or whatever he was. He was a little bit more modest culturally. But that book gives you the basic tenets of Islamic socialism. Then we had other people, and what happened to Gaddafi? He was overthrown and killed in a ditch there, wherever, I mean, brutally. Another person who was pushing the socialist element was Ben Ali. Ben Ali in Tunisia. Ben Ali, who died in 2019, who was protected until the end by the people who, of course, always... but he came into power with the Tunisian revolution. And I mean, his revolution was political, of course. It was a political revolution. He became a dictator who wanted to push this. He wanted to do a little bit what Gaddafi was doing, I guess. But then after he was overthrown himself by another revolution, the so-called Arab Springs that came together at the time, which, as you know, were all piloted by the NSA and CIA. So what happened is that he was, trained in France by the French military intelligence. He became also a attaché, I think, in a Tunisian embassy in Morocco. And all that. Ben Ali then was also appointed ambassador to Poland, which is a stronghold of the Sabbatean Frankists. So Ben Ali is another element of Islamic socialism. But then what about the Ba'ath Party? What about Assad? What about Saddam Hussein? These were the Ba'ath Party is the same thing. The Ba'ath Party was also bringing socialism to the Muslim world. These socialist institutions, like, for example, in the case of the Palestinian Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, at times were founded by Christians. That is what people don't know, that before the Salafi Muslim Brotherhood / Hamas / everything else that came with the, Al-Qaeda, all these are derivatives of the Muslim Brotherhood, and ISIS included. So,
and Leo, they're all about healthcare too, because that's what they pushed with this government shutdown, healthcare. And being all around the Middle East, it was all about healthcare, always about healthcare. Of course, the Muslim Brotherhood, took over Egypt for about a year or so, and Hillary Clinton, Obama, and Huma Abedin were all involved in that.
Right, Obama even delivered the speech.
That riot in Benghazi, and the ambassador was killed. They said it was a riot. No, it was basically some really bad hombres that came in there and took him out. So, of course. And of course, Hillary is like, we came, Vini Vidi Vici, we came, we saw, we killed him. So, and that was all. Wow.
A lot of rubbish.
The best country in the Middle East at the time. They took it down.
Because you have to understand that in the end, I was, I witnessed many Italians who suffered injustice by Gaddafi because in the early 70s and stuff. I mean, the Libyans, Libya was a colony of Italy. And at one point, they were all kicked out of the country. Their properties were confiscated. And it was a massive injustice. At the same time, though, he kind of mixed these elements of socialism and Islam in a way that he could put together all these tribes who are fiercely fighting against each other to this day in Libya, but also in Iraq. Iraq is almost like the Ba'ath Party, or what happened with Gaddafi, which wasn't the Ba'ath Party, but was a similar kind of attempt to unify what is impossible to unify with the religion, with an element, a political element. Assad, for example, Assad stabilized the Assad family, the father and him, they stabilized Syria for many decades. And Syria is not only Islamic people of one kind. You have the Alevi, you have the Christians, you have now a bunch of minorities which are getting killed by the new face of Syria, which is a former ISIS or Al-Qaeda leader.
Right.
So
wow,
who is coming to the White House? I mean, things that really...
it's crazy. I know, right? But you know, the Libyan-born Roman emperor Severus. When I was in Libya, the Roman ruins there are unbelievable. They're the best in the world. They were completely covered up by sand. They built new ports and everything, and then of course Rome fell and it got sanded over. And they were Gaddafi was.
Well, I mean, it was
cleaned them up and was getting ready to bring in the world to look at it. I got to see it. I was like, wow.
No, because you see, there was for many, the Phoenicians were based there. I mean, the ancient populations that predate Islam were waging war against the Romans, and we know that the wars were very intense. So in the end, when the Romans vindicated themselves, they actually put salt on those cities aside from burning them, so nothing could grow any longer there. They were like completely covered with salt. So
once they defeated Hannibal, it was all over. So
so that was the moment, I mean, the history of probably the world will have changed if Hannibal and the Carthaginian army will have actually arrived in Rome with their elephants, and the whole show will have probably triggered a massive change in the way the Western world will have developed.
Well, Hannibal almost he marched all the way to the gates of Rome and then backed off, and then it went downhill from there. He probably could have taken Rome, but for whatever reason, he backed down. So
I mean, something happened.
Yeah.
We know that the characteristics of Rome at times are not only the characteristic of the military, but also we know that Rome, for example, wasn't the real name of the city. The real name of the city was kept between a closed bunch of high priests who never revealed it because it was linked to the god protector of Rome, Mars. So it was Amor, the rose of Mars. And this couldn't be revealed. And in reality, because they thought that the moment you know the real name of a city, you can then work with the god who protects that city to get that city to come into the Roman Empire fold. So there was a very complex game that the Illuminati of the time were playing, and they were very much believing in this kind of things. We know that the Carthaginians definitely had their forces very much, I mean, and then after the Punic War, after everything that happened, let's not forget that the whole of North Africa became the place where, like I explained in Volume 10, we had the Fatimid, which were Shia Islam, who conquered Egypt, conquered all of North Africa. Yeah. They arrived and conquered basically. But then these Fatimids no longer exist as a branch of Islam, which is quite strange, They gave birth to other branches of the Shia Islam, including the Ashashins that helped the Knights Templar. But at the same time, it was the Sunni with Saladin who conquered and arrived. And at that point, the Pope was like, we need to intervene here. And the Crusades kicked off at a major level because of the Sunni, not because of the Shia. The Shia Islamic forces, the Fatimid in particular, they always kind of found a way to deal with Rome. But the Sunni were more... So in any case, we have today in London Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is the mayor that a lot of people say, has ruined in a way what used to be one of the financial capitals of the world. London still, to some extent, tries to be. Will that happen also in New York with Zohran Mamdani? I think that we have to be more worried about Zohran Mamdani because Zohran Mamdani is an extremist compared to Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is a Labour Party member of the most traditional kind. He's not a big Marxist or Islamo socialist. Instead, with Mamdani, it's an Islamic socialist who is telling you we're gonna have the supermarkets with the fixed price, and we're not gonna no longer make you pay the VAT. I mean, he's promising a lot of things. So what is gonna happen is basically this, Michael. There is two possibilities here: that the guy succeeds, and then they take the White House with whomever is their candidate at the next election. And that would be a tragedy for America. And we can say bye-bye to all our freedoms, because this is going to become like the Soviet Union. Or at least an embellished copy of it, I hope. I don't know. But it's just like, it's no longer going to be America as we know it. Because the majority of these young people who go into these universities, who, like I explained in volume 12 of my confessions, are directed by the Jesuits who are leftist, they actually support Mamdani. And those are the people who have voted for Mamdani in massive numbers, because they don't see the Conservative Party doing what they promised. The problem here, Michael, we have to be sincere with our audience. If you promise something, you have to deliver. If you don't deliver, you're not going to be reelected. And it doesn't matter if your name is on the ballots like Trump claims. It is a massive problem at the moment for the Republican Party, not having delivered on a number of issues, including the Epstein case, which was important and is still deemed important. For a lot of people, the Epstein case has been that moment of...
So I'm just looking at the news that the U.S. Senate just voted to end the government shutdown. And it looks like stock futures are up. Crypto is going to be up. Everything's going to be up tomorrow. And it's going to look like everything's changed, because it's almost like the Democrats, forced this shutdown so they could maybe get these people elected in Seattle and here in New York.
I think that we're still at the beginning of this whole conquering each city and placing people of an extreme leftist creed. Like I said, what is going to happen in the next 2 years in New York is important at the national level, because if Mamdani fails, Mamdani with his policies fails, that will be the end of any extreme leftist claim in this country.
Oh yeah. Okay. I think Wall Street is going to move down to Miami.
It could Palm Beach.
Palm Beach. Oh, yeah. There's already talk about it. They're already talking about it.
A lot of CEOs are moving to Palm Beach. The problem, though, and this is a problem that a lot of people in Florida have told me about, there is massive numbers of Democrats arriving. And we know what happened in Arizona with those massive numbers of Democrats arriving from California. It changed the political landscape.
Oh, yeah.
So they destroy the cities. They reduce them in rumble. They promote all their most demented policies. And then after, they force these people to leave. And those people, when they leave, rather than embracing the culture they're going to, that's going to save their wallets, they bring their own BS and promote their leftist idea, which is insane, because, if an ideology has made you bankrupt and you decide to leave California, why you want to bring the same shit to another state?
I know. It's like, come on. But, on the Republican side of that, or conservative side, or independents, whoever, somebody stand up, please. No one pushes back. And so they're able to weasel in and start to change everything. That's why I was just at debates in California last night. Candidates, and they're all like, if I get elected, and it's like, how are you going to get elected? They control the vote, and so they ask them, because there's illegal voting happening in California, how do you plan to overcome that?
California, after
it's not going to happen.
Okay, after Proposition 50 has passed, which, you know, I mean, I was kind of very surprised that it passed in the way it did.
It didn't pass because there's one county in Mount Shasta, and they did away with the Dominion voting machine.
I know very well,
and they did voting on paper, and they voted big time, 69% not to have. I
know, Michael, but the problem is there is a problem here. You see, if this polling was, let's say, call it polling, how you want to call it, this voting on Proposition 50, which I also did, put a big fat no. But it will, in a normal world, take at least a month to get all the votes from the various counties in a regular way. How is it? They had the election set, and they already knew that Proposition 51 and that Newsom was a big hero. This is insane. It's rigged. The whole thing is rigged.
Yeah, they knew right after. Now, when this interesting, the numbers, because we know the Illuminati numbers. So when the voting ended, supposedly 1 second after, the Proposition 50 was approved by 66.6%.
Yeah.
Eventually, they changed it to like 63 or something, but initially it was 66.6%. Same thing with Gavin Newsom. When Gavin Newsom,
looks like
his vote, like when they came in and tried to kick him out, he won the vote by 66.6.
I mean, he looks like the main protagonist of Omen 3. I mean, the guy looks like he's the Antichrist impersonified. I mean, and he's definitely one of the biggest candidates that we have after Obama. That Obama now, you know, has to pass on the torch of the Antichrist to somebody else. I think that Newsom is the ideal. Of course, we have also Prince William on the other side of the Atlantic. But having said that, California is completely rigged now. And after Proposition 50, that's it. It's finished. Finito. There is no way that we can ever claim anything politically correct in this state any longer. And it is with great sadness that I say that, because when we, and I personally also participated in Coachella to help Trump and getting elected, and here the Republicans really were very much, and of course we have Chad Bianco, who is still a great possibility if he miraculously managed to get elected. That will change the day, because Chad Bianco is a great sheriff here in Riverside County. However, the problem is that it's rigged. It's rigged to the core. I mean, this is the home of the Bohemian Club in San Francisco.
Even the GOP.
Huh?
So I've supported candidates in California, and the GOP basically didn't fund that candidate who was the favorite candidate.
They're rhinos.
They're rhinos. And they put all the money into a guy that was not going to win. And so that guy didn't win. So it's totally rigged.
Listen, there was a very big, important Republican meeting when I remember I wasn't yet American, but they invited me, and it was here in I think in Rancho Mirage or somewhere. And then I spoke with some people I know, and they told me, Leo, but it's just rhinos. Don't even bother. It's just rhinos. So it's just like the whole thing is rigged.
Right.
They said, no, but there is a couple of Trump's sons who are going there. Yeah, but the whole thing is rigged, these rhinos. So we have to really understand that, I mean, and we have Ken Calvert, that is from a very important family. I talk about the Calverts even in volume 12 of my Confessions, because historically they're important. So, I mean, the system is rigged. Either you're a Democrat or a Republican. In order to get to Washington, you need millions of dollars. You cannot simply candidate Michael Jaco and say, I want to bring Michael Jaco in Congress. You have to have a guy who comes to Michael Jaco and say, here is 100 million. Now you can play your card. But that means
not like you or I can go in and say, hey, we want it can't happen. You got to have all this money. It's
But
totally
remember
rigged.
this: who is giving the money? And then you follow
Exactly.
the money, and you arrive to the friends of Jeffrey Epstein. And then that is, and then that's why in the end, Trump, even if he's not criminally liable because he hasn't gone with a minor, he might have gone with a bunch of ladies. He might have enjoyed the women like we all do. But Trump might have never gone with a minor. However, because the people, a lot of people who finance him, who help him, who are in charge of the big, elite. Because if we go into the mega group, which we have discussed the other time, in the mega group, you have people who are inherently very important. I mean, like Ronald Lauder, Estee Lauder. I mean, we are talking about the cosmetics company with more money than ever.
Yeah.
If that guy can keep $1 billion, I'm gonna. These people have money, and so I think that the problem here is that, in theory, I'm saying in theory, not in practice, because communism in practice doesn't work. And this is what I remember a very dear friend of mine in Russia told me. I was at the time talking with this guy, and he said, Leo, and he was a GRU officer. So he had been working between Syria and Iraq as for the GRU, which is the Russian military intelligence. He said, communism in practice never works. And that's why the Soviet Union was ditched and the whole system was ditched. Because when you put in practice communism, it doesn't work. If you give the same salary to the doctor and the guy who is digging the thing, and what incentive does the doctor have? What incentive? So, I mean, communism, I'm talking communism the Soviet way, not the way that they're doing now in China, which is a different way, It's actually an hybrid form of communism because they are taking a lot of characteristics of capitalism and integrating them in the system. Of course, a very controlled form of capitalism, meaning that all the main companies are all under the control of the state. But in the Soviet Union, it was about real communism. And real communism doesn't encourage the human being to make progress. Because what kind of progress you want to make when you are not, when everybody's getting the same money, even the guy who has not, who doesn't work as much as you, who doesn't think as much as you, who has done many less studies than you. So the problem when it comes down to the Islamic world, when, for example, we had with the Palestinians, if you remember, we had the creation of the Marxist-Leninist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And when that was created, soon after you started to have airplane hijackings, terrorism of all kind, and basically all this was the very basis of and then when these people retired, and it was this Marxist-Leninist passed the torch to people like Hamas. So it's like you said, the elements of socialism and communism are very much present in the Islamic world because they represented for the Islamic world a reactionary ideology against colonialism. That's at least what they made them believe.
Yeah. So we have Mamdani is asking for money after winning the New York City. So he's telling everybody he's going to give them all this money. They're going to have free everything. And now he's asking people right after the race for money to make his transition to the mayor office, which is funded by the public. So you got that, and you got he went to Puerto Rico on a luxury trip to hang out with all the people that are the manipulators, like you talked about, the people with the big money. So he goes to Puerto Rico, luxury trip, rubbing elbows with all the big wigs in the Democrat Party.
Absolutely. But it's not only, you see, the problem here is, unfortunately, that these big money interests, like the ones that supported Jeffrey Epstein, like Lex Wexner lot, the whole mega group, or the people that really helped their rise. And then, of course, also when there was the fall, they simply stepped back and said, okay, we have nothing to do with him. But those people, they don't care about Democrat or Republican. Anybody who is, they have controlled every single president of both parties forever, since the very foundation, since the moment in which we have Truman on the phone with Ben Gurion. I mean, it's just like we are linked to this politics that nowadays are very much criticized. AIPAC, the fact that there is this extreme influence of Israel in the American politics. But it's not a question of Israel, it's a question of money. These are people with companies, these are people with cash. And unfortunately, cash rules. It seems like we don't have a real democracy here. And we will probably never have it until we find a way to create maybe a crowdfunding of a politician, a real crowdfunding.
Right.
Because the crowdfunding politician could really be the man of the people. But if the crowdfunding becomes Mandani saying, I need some money because now I need more money, because the guy has never worked a day in his life and he doesn't have any cash, of course, aside from whatever he's going to get. But of course, he's going to get the money from Soros. He's going to get the money of many other people. Don't think that Mandani, even for a second, is going to run out of money. The problem is finding the money for what he wants to propose to the people of New York, what he's actually claiming he will do for the people of New York. Meaning the free buses, meaning the supermarkets with the fixed price, meaning suddenly the rents that will be blocked to a certain price, fixed price in the rents. These things cost money. Yeah. And every time the socialists / communists take power, they leave debt, an immense amount of debt, because yes, they, of course, everything is proposed, When the Soviet Union ended up, they were literally bankrupt to the core.
Right.
I went there in the middle of the 90s. I went there. I was there for over a month the first time I went there. And it was simply like, apart from people were shooting themselves in the street like it was the Wild West. The people from the KGB suddenly became mafiosi. The people, you went to the supermarkets, they would sell you a Perrier bottle of water for $20 or something from the West for prices that were like, of course, not affordable for any normal Russian people.
I remember Levi's jeans, they were like being shipped over there and they were paying like crazy amounts of money for them.
But there were people who were, I remember because I was a record producer at the time, there were people who were importing clandestinely through Finland records into Russia, and they would put them in the back of a Ferrari. And then there were all these records, and then they would sell them in Russia. I mean, just to give you an idea, but this Wild West was the period in which Vladimir Putin made his name in St. Petersburg. And so in St. Petersburg, he really started to manifest his political characteristics, because before that, he was obviously simply an intelligence officer in charge, of course, of the KGB in Eastern Germany, which was one of the most important posts for the KGB. But I tell you, the fact that socialists create disasters, well, that was the biggest disaster ever. There were lines for potatoes, lines for anything.
Yeah.
People, this is what happens with socialism and communism. So I want to stress this because a lot of young people who are now giving their support to Mandani and probably to the other candidates you show me from Seattle and many other candidates that are going to emerge from the Democratic Party who are now tending to become more and more entrenched with extreme leftist ideology, they have never lived the Cold War. They don't know what the Cold War was, and they don't even know how the Cold War ended. But you, Michael, were there. You remember how it was at the end of the Cold War.
I do, yeah. Yeah, I remember the lines like you're talking about. And America started shipping wheat to Russia so they wouldn't starve.
So, I mean, we're talking about starvation. So I don't think that Mandani is going to manage to have success. But the future of the Democratic Party and the future of the White House depends, unfortunately, on the Mandani experiment. That's how it is. Because if the Mandani experiment fails, then, of course, all the people who back him, from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Bernie Sanders, we haven't really had so much endorsement from Governor Newsom. Newsom is like this kind of guy who still is staying into the center left. He doesn't want to move to the extreme left yet. But he's such a political opportunist that soon, we're going to see Newsom and his hairstyle suddenly merging with some more Marxist kind of. However, the whole thing is, remember, we are going towards the biggest revolution ever, which is the technological revolution of the AI and robotics. So this kind of ideology that gives you, the social welfare, that gives you the money where you need it when you don't have a job, might become more and more successful. How many jobs have people lost in the last few months because of the AI and robotics? And this is only the beginning. So the problem here is that the Republicans or anybody who wants to offer an alternative needs to think about that as the priority over everything else. Please show me what you were showing a moment ago, Michael. Yes.
Person is yes. A lot of people losing faith. Inflation high. Seniors struggling buying groceries. Gas prices have not gone down. What's happening? I'm hanging on, but I see many struggling. So, like you were mentioning before, that's how the communists get in, because there's high inflation. It's hard for people to survive and make ends meet. But this basically was when Trump left office. Everything was booming. And then over the last 4 years, the communists pretty much under the Biden administration.
Yeah, but then Trump didn't give. Yeah, but Michael, Trump should have made policies different that will immediately impact the people, especially after the crisis we had with Biden and with the pandemic.
Yeah,
he has not done that because maybe he wanted to overachieve through the tariffs, something that is very difficult to achieve. I don't know. It's like a situation that eventually brings, unfortunately, a whole party into disrepute, because nobody's going to vote for the Republicans if there is.
Yeah, we're really looking like we're going to probably have another stock market boom and bust, just like we did
but
in 2000.
Who earns the money in the stock market today? You and me?
No.
So
the manipulators, they're gonna do it.
They're gonna make more money. So we go back to Soros. We go back to the people, the great manipulators, and they will be making more and more and more money. And the poor.
So do you think that Trump should start arresting them?
In an ideal world, but in a practical, real world, the swamp is still very much in charge, and any attempt to drain it has not really worked out. It's almost like, because once you are in that office, you find yourself with the gun on your head and the military industrial complex on one side, pharmaceutical industry on the other, all these people wanting a piece of the cake and telling you, we have, we are the stakeholders here, not you. You are a temporary presence in the White House. We own it. So it's almost like the White House is a place where people go in and out for rent, and then after you have but you have a landlord, and the landlord is like, no, I'm sorry. Okay.
We're in a tough position because unless things turn around, then they're going to get worse. And Trump administration, or whoever's going to take over after, well, there won't be anybody taking over after Trump leaves, because the Democrats will come back in, and then we'll be completely, like you talked about, a communist country again.
But it's not only it's not a question of communism only, because we have this Islamic element that merges with communism. We saw that Islam is very versatile. During the Second World War, it merged with National Socialism. It actually, you saw the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem together with Adolf Hitler. And so that was like, then you have, of course, the elements of communism, Islamo-communism or Islamo-socialism that we discussed up until now. So Islam, for certain people, is very much actually easier to merge with such ideologies than Christianity. And it is, of course, a complete takeover once you have in the Biden era let into this country millions of people who we don't know who they are really. And yes, it's true that Tom Homan is kicking some of them out, but how many millions are still here? And how many millions of those people are Muslim? And those people, in any case, are already implementing Sharia law in their own cities around the United States of America. Here in California, we have 500,000 Muslims. There is 300,000 in Texas. There is also a large number in Michigan, in New York. So things have really, it's like in the aftermath of 9/11, we talked about jihad, about, the treatment, the fact that we had oppressive Sharia laws and all that. But what is happening now is an even more insidious thing, because like you said, Alex Soros is together with Huma Aberdeen, together united by progressive values, a Sabbatean Frankist. And let's not forget another thing that I explained in this book. Shabbatai Zevi, which religion did he convert to? Islam in 1666.
Oh my God.
And then from that moment onwards, the Dome infiltrated every single Islamic situation in the Middle East. So then, 100 years later, Jaco Frank came along and said, okay, let's franchise this in another part of the world and bring it to the more Christian side with Poland, Podolia. Podolia had briefly been a century earlier of the Ottoman Empire, but in reality at the time, then it was back into the firm hands of the Christians. We had the Orthodox, we had the Catholics, and he offered this new crypto-Judeo transformation in which he brought a bunch of Jewish converts to the Catholic world and started to infiltrate the aristocracy. And the result is then you have, and the Rothschilds then, of course, finance the wars and become richer and richer and powerful and more powerful. But behind everything, like we stated before, is the Sabbatean Frankist banking cartel. So to actually, and what is the Vatican doing today? The Vatican is not talking about the Christians dying in Nigeria, not even once mentioned ever.
Wow.
But if you kill a Muslim, be sure that Pope Leo XIV is going to come out of there on St. Peter's Square and say, this is an injustice and they are brothers. And yeah, but the Christians. So this whole system is rigged, and we have Alex Soros, who the moment he was nominated by the father, the first thing he does is going with Bill Clinton to visit Pope Francis, the Jesuit. I mean, so it's obvious that these people are really making a mockery and using instrumentary religion. One thing that I learned from studying the modernists of Islam, like Jamaluddin al-Afghani, is that Jamaluddin al-Afghani knew exactly the limits of Islam, but he used this religion. He didn't believe in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're seeing, I've seen this before in the past. When the billionaires get behind something, it's coming. And so I remember talking to people, and they were telling me, Mike, they're backing transgenderism, and all the billionaires, the Apple Club, the corporations and everything. I knew people in those that would go to these events. So they're like, yeah, they're backing transgenderism. Before it was homosexuality, now it's transgenderism. And so we've seen transgenderism come out, over the last several years. So with Soros marrying Huma Abedin, we're seeing, and with Mamdani, we're seeing they're backing the Muslims. The billionaires are backing the Muslims. So the Muslims are going to come in.
The Muslims that are now very much inclined into merging the elements of communism. So it's like Islam is more vulnerable to the manipulation of modern communism than is Christianity, because Islam shares certain doctrines with communism that tend to call for a regimented collectivized society. Doctrines, let's say, that call for the purging of those who fail to conform. Islam also shares the utopian communistic ideal demand for world conquest and world order, and who is behind the world order at the moment, if not the communist China? These principles form the bedrock, let's say, of the situation that has brought Mamdani and provided the raison d'etre of communism. But Islam is more nuanced and complex. In reality, like I stated earlier, Islam, when it's really practiced by people who believe in Islam, they reject communism. So while there should be no backing away from a vigorous critique of the dark side of Islam and Islamic doctrines, there nevertheless, I think, remains an Islamic social order that maintains the rudiments of divinely inspired law, but Muslims are in this moment are also pushed by the Sabbatean Frankists that are like present, for example, in the Hasidic community. I wrote an article, as you know, and I cited the fact that one of the last endorsement to Mamdani was given by the Hasidic community and by those in the Hasidic community that have this sect that is called I think they have a name, the Satmar. The Satmar are this Yiddish, in Yiddish, it's a group of Hasidic Judaism, and they are very much into anti-Zionism in a way. There is actually Jews who are anti-Zionist. But what I wanted to discuss with you today, because I've discussed it earlier on with the member of the Hasidic community who praised my book, is the fact that a lot of people were duped into believing the tenets of religious Zionism. As I explain in this book, Zionism is a geopolitical and political scheme, not really a religious one, though it was always aligned with political, it aligned with religious goals, maybe the Puritans, and then, of course, they fomented the father of Sabbatai Zevi, and Sabbatai Zevi manifested as the Messiah. Then this became the basis for Zionism that manifested later on also thanks to the Anglican Church and Freemasonry in England and British Israelism. But the thing is that we have to understand that Mandani was embraced by these Hasidic Jews who the normal folk doesn't know that these guys are a sect that is divided by the other Hasidic Jews. But the Hasidic Jews in general were born out of a rabbi who died because of Shabbatai Zevi. Shabbatai Zevi and the heresy of the Sabbatian Frankists created an adverse reaction that then created that movement which now we call Hasidism. And so I think it's very important to understand in this situation also the rise and fall of Jeffrey Epstein, because Jeffrey Epstein was himself, I mean, when you think about the testimony of Virginia Giuffre talking about being violently raped in a way that was not over, you know, it wasn't like simply going with a minor. It was actually torturing this minor. And she asked Jeffrey after this terrible experience the first time to do something about it. And the woman was traumatized for the rest of her life. And in fact, she ended up either suiciding herself or either being suicided. But in any case, Virginia Giuffre was a victim, and the victims are many. So when you're saying, it's a democratic hoax, that is the beginning for me of a major disappointment with Trump. Because I really spent many years of my life endorsing Trump. But you can't say that this is a democratic hoax. There is victims there. There is victims of these rich, can we say it, rich fuckers in the elite who always go untouched at the end of the day because nobody has been sentenced aside from Ghislaine Maxwell, who is now in a privileged jail position, and then you have Jean-Luc Brunel, who's been suicided, and of course Jeffrey Epstein. But I mean, how many people went to Little St. James? How many powerful people should be arrested, should be investigated? It's not a democratic hoax. This is a scandal that we need to persevere in analyzing. So we understand, though, that when the Sabbatian Frankists are so powerful that they control the big pharma, they control parts of the military industrial complex through the banking system. It's like you want to end up like JFK. I mean, JFK made that last speech, which really says it all before he was whacked.
Going after the secret societies, yeah.
But it's
they killed him because he, in their eyes, in their system, he committed treason. He was dealing behind the scenes with the Russian ambassador and the president. He was talking behind CIA lines because they wouldn't have allowed that. So they found out about it. And so then they convicted him of treason, and then they assassinated him.
But the problem here is, after so many decades, we at the end all those promises, and we still don't know the truth about who killed JFK. And at the same time, we have very questionable events that surround Charlie Kirk's assassination. We have Charlie Kirk that admitted during the course of the summer that he was having problems with certain Jewish elements. Now, this is not to say that we are anti-Semitic in any way, shape, or form, because that's why I received the praise of people who are from the Jewish community who understand the relevance of this book. But also, I don't want Israel to be eliminated, because Israel is the product nowadays of the suffering of people who have been literally manipulated left, right, and center by the Sabbatian Frankists. And in fact, another problem is with the religious Zionism. Religious Zionism was, in a way, promoted so they could get the religious side, let's say, of the Hasidic community and so on to jump on board. And this happened, and of course, I mean, the main person responsible for this was Abraham Isaac Koch. Abraham Isaac Koch died in 1935, so before Israel was manifested fully, but he was an Orthodox rabbi and the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of British Mandatory Palestine. He is considered the father of religious Zionism, and the problem is that today, and I spoke with people I know in Israel and also here in the Jewish community here who are very disappointed because in the end they understood that religious Zionism became simply another tool in the box of the great manipulators that didn't care at all about the religious connections. So, like I wrote in this book, Zionism unites the opposites. Like the Star of David, the two triangles that come together, it unifies the opposites. And let's say that because right in the period of the Balfour Declaration, which happened, of course, in London with that letter to the Rothschild and all that, Abraham Isaac Koch was also in England. Let's not forget that in fact, I explained the great responsibility that England has in the development of Zionism and ultimately in the creation of Israel. And who is that was closer to Jeffrey Epstein and who is now a disgraced prince? Prince Andrew. And Prince Andrew is simply an elite member which you can't question. Yes, you can take away his titles, this and that and all the other, but in the end, I will never believe in a million years that the guy will be called by Congress to answer questions here in the United States. I don't think so. I think
so let's talk about this one. We talked about it before the show. So in other shows, you talked about how the Jesuits came in to China and influenced China and so forth. And now we have Chinese influence coming into America on a massive scale. We had Seattle with the Wuhan flu. It started in Seattle. Right now, probably tomorrow, we're going to have a communist that's going to win the mayor seat for Seattle. And we have the same thing in New York, where was another blow up of the Wuhan flu as well. Trump sent in the ships, the Mercy ships or whatever, the naval, hospital ships. They were never used. He sent it, I think, to L.A. and sent it to, New York because it was all a hoax. There was really no big, death rates and anything like that. So the communist influence from China, is there some kind of connection there as well?
Well, of course. In fact, once I spoke with this guy from Turkish intelligence. I was in Norway, and he told me that the only people allowed to deal with drugs in mainland China were the Mossad.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, I said, what?
Yeah, Trump has talked about how in China they if they catch you dealing drugs, they kill you the same day.
But apparently this guy said...
unless you're Mossad, I guess.
Unless you were Mossad. And why is that? Because apparently there was some, dealings also that went on there. I mean, when you're talking about, very well, black ops within the intelligence, how they are funded with drug money. And so, so the whole thing is kind of goes back to that. We have in this current situation in China, the legacy of the Jesuits but also we have the legacy of the Sabbatean Frankists. In fact, Linda Rothschild, who is a friend of Epstein, who then married into the Rothschild family, or the Rothschild family itself, they're considered heroes in China. I remember once I read an article and I was in disbelief. They had published a book about the history of the Rothschilds in China, and I think it was the Rothschild with her husband, now deceased, I think what's his name, Ed, who went and presented the book, and there were lines and lines of people. Chinese wanted to know everything about the Rothschild. They were simply like, wow, enthused by the whole thing. So this gives you an idea that and you know that 20%, who owns 20% of the Bank of China?
It's Rothschild?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
So here we are talking about the one of the most important Sabbatean Frankist families. Nowadays, Linda Rothschild is getting rid of The Economist. The Economist, you know who's buying The Economist? Like I explained in this book, is the new heir to the Sabbatean Frankist sect, John Elkann. John Elkann, who was with the Juventus soccer team in the Oval Office in May. This gentleman here.
Wow.
And
wow, you just tied it all together. Sabbatean Franks again in China, in the United States, in
Michael,
Islam.
I tell you the trick. I tell you the trick so you can always get it right. It's always the same protagonist. Is the banking cartel of the Sabbatean Frankists, the spiritual of the Jesuits and the Vatican, and these two rule the world. And the rest is kind of comes down from this pyramid of power. And then
very good. Once you understand that, you just start to look for the connections. Yeah. Wow. Brilliant.
And it makes it easy for you to also go through, because there is a million tentacles of many possibilities, no? I think it is very important for people to understand that today, like I explained in the introduction of this book, and I will never say it enough, we are in front of a big dilemma, because the moment in which if we ever reveal the whole truth about Epstein, it's not about the political party, it's about the whole system, like we said, crumbling down. So this is something that will make us weak. And who will take advantage of the whole thing? China. Then China, though, who is really ruling China? Who has created Shanghai? And then, and I explained this in volume 12 of my Confessions when I talk about the Jesuits in China. Nancy Pelosi is now retiring with all those millions. Part of those millions come also from having made possible the deal, which is currently still secret, between the Vatican and China. Today, the only Catholic church in China is the Catholic State Church. This was impossible before, but because of the secret deals that Nancy Pelosi, often working with disgraced Cardinal McCarrick, the pedophile and all that, Nancy Pelosi is a mafiosi of the ultimate level. I mean, think about it, dealing with mafiosi in China to impose the main branch because Catholicism went underground and was opposing the state, even still at the time of Ratzinger. But now there is only one Catholic Church, and they put the image of Jesus and the image of Mao Zedong on the other side. And you have to worship them both. That is catho-communism. And the same thing ultimately might happen with Islam. The fact that Islam doesn't have all the images like in the Catholic tradition makes it even more easy because, there is no images of saints and stuff. But once you have all these new Muslims that embrace, because I saw it myself, and I tell you, Michael, it was over 20 years ago that for the first time I opened the newspaper. I was in Norway, and I read about Islamo communism, about the fact that they were merging these two aspects. And today, Scandinavia is in the hands of the Islamo communists, Islamo socialists.
Wow. Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me once again here. And I think we have given once again a great analysis for our viewers in this incredible 90 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leo. And the description box has all the links for Leo, so definitely check
Absolutely.
those out.
I think that for today's show, refer to this book, my latest, The Rise and Fall of Frankie's Monster, as well as Volume 10, which is about Islam also. So it's very pertinent to Volume 12 about the Jesuits. But these are the books that, of course, we have cited information from during the course of this show. And thank you for having me on once again, Michael. God bless you. God bless all your wonderful audience.
Thanks, Leo.
Thanks.